here we go. Right. Okay. So, uh, fueling performance for basketball. Because this is number three of our kind of physical performance program type seminars or seminar type things. Today I'll go through some considerations for your general kind of diet and things to think about with that. What a what a calorie is, what a protein, a fat, and what macronutrients are. I won't go into micronutrients. That's something that a nutritionist would do. That's out with my scope of practice. Although it's very within my scope of practice to recommend that you have as varied a diet as possible, so you're covering as many bases as possible. But we'll get into that. Um, uh, so that's part number one. Part number two, we will talk about your pre practice or game routine in terms of your nutrition, your post practice game or routine, and recovery in between your practices. Okay, so the assumptions that I'm going to make for this are that you're doing the following three things. And these are three things that you should be doing if you're not doing them. Okay. Number one, you're lifting weights 2 to 3 times a week in order to get stronger to help support your basketball performance. If you're not doing that, you should be doing that. Okay. Number two, you're attending basketball practices, games, scrimmages, open runs 2 to 3 times a week in order to improve your basketball skills, get conditioned for basketball, be in good enough shape to, when you're called upon, perform on the court. And thirdly, that you're not actively trying to lose or gain weight. That's going to mess with your performance. Not a huge amount, but it is enough of a confounding factor that there are other things to consider. And I'll get into more details with that. Okay, so um, firstly, some background information. Okay, so food is made up of macronutrients. Now, we don't eat macronutrients, we eat food. So, food is always some combination of all of these. All right. So, we have carbohydrates, fats, proteins, and some would consider that fiber is the fourth macronutrient, although it tends to not actually provide any uh, calorific value as much as the other three, but is important for gut health, digestion, regular maintenance of like a good kind of bowel schedule, shall we say? Um, all that stuff. Okay, so carbohydrates. So that's things like pasta, rice, bread, or these are sources of carbohydrates. Oats, uh, fruits and vegetables, they are sources of carbohydrates. Okay, all of those things are sources of carbohydrates. A carbohydrate, 1 gram of carbohydrate equals 4 kilocalories, which is just shortened to calories for kind of general speak. All right. And then you have proteins. So sources of protein are like basically meats, so fish, chicken, beef, lamb, pork. You have eggs, dairy, quite a good source of protein. Obviously, it depends on what the source is. It could be more tilted towards being a fat source than a protein source. Things like protein powder. I think that's everything there. But you get various vegetarian sources of protein powder and stuff as well. Things like tofu, all that kind of stuff, right? And then you have fats. So that is things like olive oil. So sources of fat would be things like olive oil, avocados, any nut or seed oils, any nuts or seeds. They tend to be quite high in protein, but are actually in fact uh, fat sources because you get way more calories from them from fat. And then fiber, if you have a well-rounded um, diet with plenty of fruits and vegetables, plenty of nuts and seeds, plenty of whole grains, you're usually going to get about enough fiber. the daily recommendation for that does fluctuate depending on how many calories you're eating. So if you're having a very high calorie diet, you want to have a little bit more fiber just because there's more stuff going through you. But it ranges for anywhere between 30 to 50 grams of fiber per day. If you're hitting 30, that's probably enough for you to cover all your bases, unless you're on a very high calorie diet, which for basketball players, most of you won't. Typical people that would be on a very high calorie diet would be like people like doing bodybuilding shows, strongman, people drastically trying to gain weight, all that kind of stuff. Okay. So a carbohydrate has 4 kilocalories per gram. Protein has 4 kilocalories per gram, and fat has 9 kilocalories per gram. So one I forgot to put in there was alcohol. Actually, alcohol has 7 kilocalories per gram, but we won't mention that in terms of like any performance adding effects because I think other than um, uh, people who take part in like shooting, alcohol across the board is not a performance enhancing drug. Uh, and but I'll not get any more into that. We'll just put that aside. Okay, so that just for your general information, alcohol is 7 kilocalories per gram. Okay. What I would suggest you try and do through the season is, unless you are very overweight or very underweight, that you try and maintain the body weight that you currently are, uh, with what we would call a calorie balanced diet. So basically, where your expenditure through your what's called your basal metabolic rate, so that's just the amount of calories that you burn just existing, just with the lights on, your the calories that you burn through exercise. So that's organized activity. So that's either going to the gym, practice, and then you have the calories that you burn through non-organized exercise. So that would be things like fidgeting, doing the dishes, walking to pick up to the shop to get the newspaper, things that you're going to do just overall. And then the fourth factor in your total calories burned per day is called your thermic effect of food. And that's basically the process of digesting your foods does require a little bit of calorie input from your body. So when you add those four things up, you get a total amount of calories that you burn each day. What you want to try and do is try and match your intake with that total amount. That's going to be different for everyone. It would be based on your body weight, your lean muscle mass, your age, your sex, your height, um, and your physical activity. So if you're very physically active, but you're very slight, you're going to require less, maybe the same amount of calories as someone who's like overweight but very physically inactive to maintain your body weight. Okay, so that's kind of the idea behind that. Uh, the When you are constructing or organizing your meals, you want to be aware that you're not eating macronutrients, you're eating food. So every meal that you construct or cook or however you want to think about it is going to be a combination of all of these things. And you want to have a really wide and varied input from your protein sources, your carbohydrate sources, and plenty of fruits and vegetables to get some more carbs and fiber and cover yourself in kind of terms of the micronutrients that you're going to get. Okay. So, have we got any questions on that so far?
No, it's a good refresher of my personal training course that I've done a while ago.
Yeah. No. Okay, perfect. Right, so I'll move on to the next bit. Okay, so um, hydration is the next bit I wanted to cover. Hydration is very important for performance, recovery, general just feeling good, helps your skin, helps your cells recover. So hydration comes in two parts. It comes in the fluids that you're intaking, but also the mineral content of those fluids. If you are like me and you perspire a lot, sweat a lot, I have to make sure that your sweat just isn't just water. You're sweating out potassium, sodium, electrolytes, basically. So that's the kind of like the broad term. So all the EMs, so calcium, magnesium, potassium, sodium, all those minerals get sweated out. So you've got to replace those. And what the mistake that people can make is they sweat and then they drink water out. They've already leached out some of their minerals, and then they're then diluting that further with basically topping themselves up with just pure water. Um, this can lead to what's called hyponatremia, where basically the concentration levels of these minerals in your cells becomes low enough that if it does get low enough, it can become clinical, and you can need to go to the hospital when you have symptoms. Most people don't get to that stage. Your body has regulatory systems that like make you crave salty things so that you'll intake enough sodium. Or just to, for example, um, the but what it will do is it will be low enough that it will lower your performance. It will lower. You'll start to get more fatigue. You won't recover as well in between your sessions. You won't perform as well during your sessions. You'll have things like brain fog, which will affect your ability to make decisions on the court. It'll affect things like your coordination and your ability to have stamina, basically. So all of these things can be solved by simply having a rather than drinking just plain water, which is fine, but along with that, so you could have a bottle of water with your practice, but then also be sipping an electrolyte drink. Um, how I do that is I go to Home Bargains and they do like hydro, like effervescent kind of hydration tabs that you water with two of those, and then I top it off with some fruit juice for some simple carbohydrates. So that's the kind of the advice that I would give most people around hydration. You've got to think about it. It's not just fluids; it's the minerals that you're trying to replace through your exertion um, on the basketball court, in the gym, general life. Okay, um, we will get a lot of those from your diet, and if you are a person who like maybe just goes to the gym a couple of times a week and doesn't, and maybe like walks the dog like a couple of times a day, you're not going to be at a level of exertion where you're losing so much minerals. You actively have to do something on top of a generally well balanced diet to replace those. But for people who are practicing basketball twice a week, lifting the gym 2 or 3 times a week, and have all those other things to do, I say it was definitely something that you need to think about. Um, okay, so that's hydration, right? And then recovery. Let's do recovery last. I had that next. Let's do pre-workout practice. Okay, so you um the routine in terms of your pre-workout should be pretty similar as much as you can make it. In terms of like a pre-workout meal, I would make it a higher carbohydrate meal with some simple carbohydrates. So that could be like a pasta dish, something lower fats and pasta and chicken. Or if you're so I would suggest you maybe have that like 2 to 3 hours out. That is some more complex carbohydrates. So basically, starchy carbohydrates take longer for your body to digest down into simpler sugar carbohydrates. Okay. Uh, so if you're having a meal before practice, practice starts at 7:30. You want to be having your last like big meal 2.5 hours before that. Um, that can give us problems because most of us work till 5 o'clock. So there's two ways around that. One, you have your big meal after practice and you make it a post workout strategy, which I'll come on to in a minute. And before that, you have a really simple carbohydrate meal. So that could be the uh, the pre-workout, like the drink that I suggested, and the hydration with like the water, the minerals, and the fruit juice. Or it could be with maybe even like a caffeinated beverage if you're needing that extra kick in terms of dampening down your fatigue to have a good training session, that the heightened awareness that comes with that. Just be aware with caffeine, there is it's a double-edged sword because you might be able to perform better in the session or in the game, but then that caffeine's going to be in your system till late on at night. So if you are going to have caffeine pre-workout, pre-practice, pre-game, I would have it so that you time it. It luck. So what was I going to say? The half life of caffeine for most people is somewhere between 4 and 6 hours. So if you have like a can of Monster, right? Let's just take this a generic approach here. A can of Monster is 150 milligrams of caffeine. 4 hours later, you have still have between 4 and 6 hours later, you still have between like 70 and 80 milligrams of caffeine in your bloodstream. So let's say you have your caffeine, your Monster at 4 o'clock. By somewhere between 8 and 10 p.m., you still basically have a large coffee's worth, which is a large coffee will be somewhere between, depending on the brand, depending on how they brew it, depending on if it's like cold brew, espresso machine, all that kind of stuff, somewhere between 70 and 80 milligrams. So you're basically having a large coffee at between 8 and 10 p.m. I think you can probably imagine that's not a good idea if you want to get a good restful night's sleep. So it does have a double-edged sword in terms of caffeine. All right. You want your pre-workout meal to be a lower fat meal. So things like some like basically some sweets. So if you're not able to have a full meal before your practice and you want to put that full meal to the end of practice, I would say something like I quite like Haribo Fantastics. Some really simple carbohydrates that are easily absorbed. They are your friend in this situation. Everyone thinks sugar's bad. Sugar is not bad, and if you can uh, have it be lower fat, um, and the reason for that again is to help with digestion and to help with the speed of digestion. It's not like things are getting digested better or worse, but it's just simply the speed. If you have a high fat meal, you're gonna literally slow down the absorption of those carbohydrates through your intestine into your bloodstream to go round to your muscles to be used. And then lastly, a moderate protein source from those, basically just because you want to keep your protein high and you want every meal to be a chance for you to consume a little bit of protein. But again, protein is slightly, especially if you're having like beef or chicken or something like it's going to come with some fat. So it's going to be slowed down with the digestion. All right. So if you can have a pre-workout meal, higher carbs, lower fat, moderate protein. If you can't and you want it to be somewhere between 2 and 3 hours before you start exerting yourself so that it's not sitting in your stomach and it's going to be there to like be thrown up if you make you unwell or feel queasy, along with some hydration and possibly a caffeinated drink. If you can't have that pre-workout meal and you want to push that meal back to after your practice or more be like a recovery meal, which we'll come to like a post-workout, we'll come to that in a second. You would want to have some simple carbohydrates, sweets, some fluids, something that's going to get in you, not make you feel like bloated and like you're trying to digest it while you're trying to exert yourself on the basketball court. Okay. Right, so that's pre-workout. Intra-workout, basically the hydration we talked about earlier, that's the advice that I would give you intra-workout. Um, it's 300 milliliters per 30 minutes of exercise, I think is like the general rules. Now, and that's where I would start for most people, but if, so basically, no, was it 15 minutes? Yeah, no, it's 300 milliliters every 15 minutes. So basically, a 2 hour long basketball session, you should be having 1.2, 2.4 liters of water, so nearly a gallon of water. That might seem a lot to some people, and if that seems a lot to you, maybe you're on the low end of that scale. I know personally, I could probably have that um, um, with ease. The magic number with this is when we start to lose above, if we lose 1% of our body weight in fluids, we see a depreciation, a what's the word I'm looking for? A noticeable drop off in physical performance. So if you're a 100 kilogram male and your clothes soak up a kilogram of your sweat, then you need to replace that. A good way to do that is actually like post practice when you're getting changed after your practice is to like go and weigh your clothes after and know what the weight of those before. And if your clothes weigh a lot more, and I know mine do, so I've got to really focus on keeping hydrated before and after practice. Uh, like my clothes are soaked by the time I come to a practice. So I really that's a good way to know for yourself, a good litmus test to see what the situation is there. Um, any questions so far?
Yeah. So 2.4 liters, it seems
Mhm.
like quite a lot, to be honest.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if you're
Well,
going to cover this off.
like a big bottle of Volvic water
Yeah.
will be 1.5 liters.
Mhm.
I think so. This is like that's kind of like the if you're exerting yourself now a basketball session you're not exerting yourself for the whole 2 hours, so you can
Yeah.
maybe get a little bit. So say out of a 2 hour session you're maybe doing 75 minutes of actual exertion, you could maybe cut that down to 1.5 liters. Yeah, sorry, what was your actual question?
Yeah, no, that's fine. I just
Yeah,
find it quite interesting that it would be like that much water that
yeah,
you would be having to
yeah.
consume.
So if you think about it this way, just in the maths of it, if you're 100 kilograms, you wanna you wanna make sure you're not getting down to 99 kilograms during your session. So
Mhm.
you've got to at least drink 1 kilogram of water, which is a liter.
Yeah.
And then you've got to consider, oh, maybe if you were a little bit dehydrated before the session. There's other things like you're perspiring as well. It's like so it's a margin of error that you're probably going to have to think about, and it'll be individual for each person. It won't be set in stone. You can maybe go down to uh, like 1.5 liter, between 1 and 1.5 liters. I think a liter is probably a liter of fluid that has the minerals and some carbohydrate in it. I think that's probably a good thing to go for. And if you're
Mhm.
feeling thirsty after that, that maybe means you're a little bit dehydrated before the session started.
Yeah.
And need to watch that and stay hydrated throughout the day. Yeah, right. I'll move on to the last couple of bits. Right, so we've covered um, what calories are, the content of calories. We've covered a bit of why we want to focus on minerals as well as fluids. We've covered our pre-workout meal. We've covered our intra-workout kind of hydration. The last two things I want to cover are our post-workout or practice meal, and then just general recovery for weight training, your strength and conditioning work that you should be doing, and recovering from your basketball sessions. Okay, so practice is finished. You have done everything I've told you so far. You're in a pretty good place. You shouldn't feel too depleted after your basketball practice unless it's a very, very hard session, which obviously is not going to be happening all of the time. There might be periods of time where your coach is trying to build your cardiovascular fitness, improve conditioning up to the standard that they want. So they're focusing in more on that. Those sessions you might be a bit more depleted. Those sessions you might need more carbohydrates. You might need some more intra-workout carbohydrates. Your post-workout meal should try and do three things. Three things. One, replace the actual carbohydrates in the muscle that you've used. Two, replace any additional fluids or minerals that you need and electrolytes. And three, provide adequate protein to restructure damaged muscle, to clear out any damaged muscle, to help with adaptations that come from the ligaments, tendons, all that kind of stuff. And that applies to basketball practice and gym work as well. In terms of how much protein you should be eating per day, the recommendation is somewhere between 0.8 and 1.2 grams per pound of body weight. So if you are 100 kilograms, that means you're 220 pounds. So that means you're in the range of between 180 and 260 grams of protein per day. And that range will depend on if you're if you're trying to add muscle, you're going to have to be at the end of that range. If you're trying to maintain muscle mass while you're in a cut, trying to lose body weight, you want to be at the higher end of that range. If you're training really hard, doing your lots of S&C work, lots of muscle breakdown, then I would be at the higher end of that range. If your training is kind of just like maintenance, you can be at the lower end of that range. If you're not trying to lose or gain body weight, you're just trying to maintain your body weight, you can be at the lower end of that range. So, but between 0.8 and 1.2 grams per pound of body weight. Okay. Uh, in terms of general recovery, you've got to be eating enough calories to maintain your body weight. So if you're losing body weight and that's something you feel, actually, I want to maintain my body weight, you've got to up your calories. And that can come from keeping, for most people, the strategy I'll use for that is we set your protein at whatever your protein is set at, and that depends on the factors I just talked about. And then the rest of your calories comes from proteins and fats, and we spread those out in an appropriate fashion based on your practices, your gym workouts, and what days you're resting. So in days you're resting, you could probably have a little bit. So James, that maybe you're just doing like a kind of normal, like walking the dog, just doing your normal work, housework around the thing. You would want to have a higher fat day that day, just because that'll help bump up your calories a bit. It'll also help with fat soluble vitamins and minerals, all that good stuff. You don't want to be low fat all the time. People will run into problems with hormones, hair loss, skin, all that kind of stuff. And then save the higher carbohydrate days for the days that you're training, the days that you're going to be physically exerting yourself, and you're going to be in that heart rate zone where you are burning carbohydrates. So you want to have higher carbohydrates on those days. All right. So that's just kind of general. Make sure you're hydrated on the days you're not training, and make sure you're sleeping well. I would say if you're looking to perform really, really well, you need to be sleeping 9 to 10 hours a night. You'll get away with 8, but when you cross that barrier up for 9 or 10 hours a night, the difference is phenomenal. For example, LeBron James, who we all know, he sleeps 10 hours at night and then also has a 90-minute nap during the day. So this guy is sleeping 11 and a half hours a day. He is taking his sleep extremely seriously, and that is possibly along with genetics, all that other stuff, just the fact that he's a freak athlete. That is how that's how he's lasted this long, because he has put really a lot of his resources into making sure he's looking after his body. Okay, so that's everything I've got to talk about just now. If there's any questions, we can go over those, and if not, after I've answered questions, I'll just wrap up, and that'll be us for tonight.
Yeah, one question. There was at time like a sort of a craze for like those isotonic drinks.
Hmm.
So that'll be obviously in relation to hydration. So
Yeah,
stuff like Gatorade, Powerade, you'll have
yeah.
seen like people using those. Is there an appropriate time for this, and are they any better than like just simple water?
So they will be better than water because they have some carbohydrates in them, just sugar, but they tend not to be dosed enough. There tends not to be enough sodium, potassium in them to actually make them to provide enough to actually help with that factor. They tend to have just enough in them to say they have them in them, basically, so that they can say on the label electrolytes, but they're generally not dosed enough. Um, so after a heavy training session, literally 1,000 milligrams of sodium, unless you have contraindications. Otherwise, for example, your doctors told you to be in a low sodium diet because you possibly have like heart issues with like a heart condition or anything. 1,000 milligrams of sodium is probably not a bad idea. Uh, um, a Gatorade might have 100 milligrams of sodium, 150 at most. So they're just not dosed enough. It's a sales gimmick thing. They are better than water because they've got carbohydrates in them, but for the extra money, you could just put like you could buy 30 or 40, like you could buy a carton of orange juice or apple or fruit juice, uh, and just portion it out because they've probably got a Gatorade maybe or a Lucozade Sport or something has got like 30 grams of carbohydrates in it. You could get that for like 15, 20 pence from a carton of fruit juice. Just put it in the water out of the tap and add a couple of salt tablets to it, and you're getting a drink that's way better. Even just like actual just table like some grinder salt out of the grinder. Uh, you're getting a drink that's way better, way more effective for like 15-20% of the cost, basically. Um, they are they're like a sport. They're a sports drink. They're a brand. They're Coca Cola. They rely on marketing to sell their thing. And if you like them, great, have them. But they're just not doing what you think they're doing for you.
Okay. Yeah, that's fair
Okay.
enough. That's really
Yep.
good to know.
Uh, anything else?
No, that's the only question I had. So yeah, that's it. Thank you very much for
Right.
this. That was quite interesting.
Perfect, Camille. So I'll put this up on YouTube. I'll remind everyone, make sure you subscribe to my YouTube channel, and jump over to Instagram. And if you've got any questions, you can shoot me a message there if you're watching this post thing, because obviously we just got Camille here tonight. Thank you very much for coming, Camille. That was a really good question. And we'll do the next one. I can't do 2 weeks today. I can't do a week today. Let's go the Sunday before Christmas. We'll do that. We'll do that one, and then that'll be the last one until after till New Year. I'll get a Rennie to put up a spawned event for that. I haven't decided what that'll be on yet. Oh,
Yeah, no worries.
yeah.
That's all good.
Okay. Perfect. Right. Cheers, Camille. I'll speak to you later.
Thanks. See ya. Bye bye.
Cheers. Bye. Bye.